Hey guys, I'm here with Michael Pierce, a fellow INFJ. I don't think he really needs an introduction, but here he is. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Michael Pierce. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about Jungian typology and a little bit of philosophy, but mostly Jungian typology, the MBTI personality types and stuff. And it's become pretty popular. So I really like doing it, and it's a pleasure to be interviewed by Pucokie. Pucokie. Yeah, because I watched that video that you made where you explained it's your channel trailer, as it were, but I couldn't remember how it was pronounced. So anyway.
Yeah, that's okay. A lot of people have a problem pronouncing it. But my name's Emily, but I think you already know that from.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just jump right into this. I assume people have heard of you before, but if they haven't, would you like to explain how you got into typology?
Sure. I'll try not to make it too long of a story.
Oh, you can definitely make it long. I feel like people are going to enjoy it.
Well, because I think I've told the story once before, but it's along the lines of I think I was with a group of friends, and we were maybe this is not the best origin story, but I was with a group of friends, and we I think it was my idea, and we started looking up Chinese zodiac symbols and like their meaning and stuff. So it kind of has that link, but. And I remember calling my friend, a very good friend of mine, and I mentioned it to him because I thought it was sort of funny because the Chinese zodiac has like romance options and there were guys and girls at the table. So it was like, haha, we know how this is going to work out now. So it was just kind of silly. But I called him up to tell him what his Chinese zodiac symbol was. And he's like, yeah, today I took, have you heard of the MBTI? I'm pretty sure that's how it went down, because I'm pretty sure he was the one who told me. And I was like, oh yeah, was it that one test that I took way back in health class in high school? And so this would be like 3 or 4 years ago now. Good grief, time flies. But so he had mentioned it to me, and then I think like a little bit a couple days went by, and then I remembered and I went and took it was the test that's, I don't think they do it for free anymore, but it was truity.com. And I was just in my room and I took the test. And I remember I had just gotten back from a hike and had had the thought that, it'd be interesting to go and take that personality test, because I remember in health class it feeling really like it had struck me, but I couldn't remember anything of what it said. So I took it and got INFJ. And I read the truity description, but was kind of like, I don't know what it's trying to say. And then I went to personality page. So I guess shout out to all these different people. I assume they're still around. I don't know what they're doing these days, but personality page had a description of the INFJ and, classic that I think is more common for NI types now. I think because it's like that intuition, like you just grip onto it and you're like, this makes sense, and you're certain of it. And I think NE might, I would be willing to bet NE has a harder time with that. But once again, they need to let me know. That's my current theory. But so, I mean, I specifically remember reading about the notion that the INFJ will like know things or think they know things, but not know how or why, and would be very sensitive to how other people are feeling. And it was the fact it was able to not just tell me what I was like, but give some sort of explanation that went a bit deeper, that could explain more than just the symptoms. And that was part of what blew my mind. And so from there, I mean, I kind of got, it was really kind of unaccountable. I just sort of became, I guess it was an obsession. It wasn't like a bad thing. It was just, I wanted to know more. I wanted to know more about INFJs because this was no one had explained that much about me before in that kind of a depth. Or it was just like it had expanded my mind in understanding the universe in terms of, because understanding yourself, you start to understand more of the universe. So um, I started looking up more about INFJs, and then eventually I started being like, okay, if I'm really going to understand INFJ and understand what these cognitive functions are and all these different confusing things, I feel like I finally need to start to understand what the other types are too, so that I can understand and contrast. And once I started doing that, it was like mind explosions again. I used Personality Page. I, would write out what the types were and tried to condense it down to summaries. And all of a sudden I started realizing, oh, I've met these kinds of people, I think, like generally, like, or I've seen them in history, and it was like, oh, it's like so helpful for organizing, and it just kind of took off from there. So I don't know if that's a full answer to your question or anything.
Really good answer though. Uh,
Yes.
so what like got you to start your channel and start you posting videos about the different types?
Yeah. So let's see, at this point where I was just learning about it, where would I have been? So I no, yeah. So far, this would be before, because I'm pretty sure most people know by now that, because I keep mentioning it, that I'm Mormon. So I mention that simply because I went on a mission. So if you've ever been pestered by the Mormon missionaries, then I was one of those guys. So be nice to them, please. But they're young, and anyway, but during then I met a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, and I knew about personality, and I was able to kind of observe people more. And I remember near the end of my time, I thought to myself, I got the idea, the notion that how I really want to explain this to people, because I feel like I've had such a hard time gathering all of the information to explain, like to understand. It's like taken me like a year or more to like feel like I even have a notion of what the cognitive functions are and this kind of stuff, because everybody says different things, and like the information scattered everywhere, and so I was like, man, and it's not like laid out in a way that I would want it laid out, where it's very like clear and logical. And so I started planning out, okay, how would I explain it? And I was trying to figure out a format. So when I came back home, um, it was within a couple months that I finally was like, you know what? I'm gonna actually try to do this. I'm going to make YouTube videos, because I had known a little bit about YouTube, but it was still kind of like scary unknown territory. And but I just sort of decided that I was just going to try it, and I was going to head out, and I knew like nothing about it, but I had some experience with like editing film a little bit, because I'd made really terrible home movies with my friends. If I'm brave enough and can fish them out somehow, I might think it's entertaining enough to put them on the channel so people can laugh at how bad they are. They're bad because they're so pretentious. I'm like trying to be like trying to do like trying to make my best friend like this action hero, and it's so bad. But anyway, so I had a little bit of like experience with like, Windows Movie Maker or something like that, and so I just started figuring out the format. I wrote all these scripts, and so that was the original typology lessons. And that was my original plan, was that, okay, this is the meat of what I want to put out. And I put out those original lessons. And then it was more of kind of like, okay, I guess I should put out actual type videos. And I was like, they'll be like 4 or 5 minute long type videos. Because in my mind, it's like, well, if you go through the steps of learning what the functions are, then you just have to put them together. And that's a better description of the type than what I could offer you. But I ended up doing the first type video, and it was I believe it was the ESTJ or the ISTJ. It was one of those two. I I think it was the ESTJ.
Yeah,
And
I might be wrong.
do you remember or?
I think it was. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry.
But no, you're good. And anyway, I mean, I laugh at myself now that I thought they were going to be like 5 minutes, and also that I was like, oh, it's just like a side thing. And of course, those are the most popular ones for obvious reasons, because that's what people want to look up. And I mean, and so I've just kept making videos to try to explain these things. And I've wondered if I would hope that I've been able to, communicate the ideas behind personality in a way that's more accessible to people. And I've made like I'm nearing 200 videos now, and so that's like a lot of material for people to wade through. So sometimes I guess I worry a little bit about that, but um, I'm just I just keep going with it. I've branched out to do other things with the channel that uh, I'm sure will never be as popular as the original type videos that I did, but I just really hope that, and I'm glad when it's really flattering and almost a little bit scary when people tell me how much they appreciate those videos, because I'm like, oh, I really hope I haven't misled anybody because they seem to really like them. I'm very self-deprecating that way, but I'm really glad it's helped out, because that's how it is. Like I've talked a little bit about in the Q&A, is that it's much more about kind of a subjective confirmation. So, it's something that people have to see for themselves if it works. And people keep telling me it works, so I'm like, all right, I'm getting it right. So anyway, that's my long answer to that. But
Well, going kind of back to your uh, kind of how you got into video and stuff. I have a few video series with my best friend Rachel. One of them is we actually acted out Gone with the Wind,
oh,
and
really?
she played Scarlett, and I played everybody else.
That kind of sounds a little bit like what I did.
It was
I
it
got
was,
some other people, but
but
what's that?
we also did like Titanic, and
Oh.
she was Rose and I was Jack, and I like made Jack into like this thug kind of like I like turned my hat backwards and I was just like
That's adorable.
but I don't think she ever wants me to post those videos. Even though I would absolutely love to post those videos. They're so funny. I was 14. So.
Oh, oh, that's so weird. That's right about when no, it would have been when I was 14, because that, at least that first one I did was in freshman year of high school, I think. But oh man, anyway, interesting.
So I understand. Um,
Yes.
so I guess kind of, I mean, I know that this is a lot of like stuff about typology, and I am one of the people that watches your other videos, and I enjoy your other videos. I really liked your Jesus videos.
Oh,
Yeah,
I apologize. I haven't come back to those yet.
yeah.
I'm kind of bad about that, but I'm glad you liked those.
That's okay. I just like listen to them. I listened to a lot of your, or especially when I was really getting into typology, I would just listen to your videos like in the background while I was doing something. And I've listened to, I don't even know how many times I've watched some of your videos. Like, like it's, I seriously recommend you to everybody.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I know that you hate, you don't like hearing.
No, it's fine. It is totally.
I know. But you are very inspiring, and but anyways, how did you get into the rabbit hole slash black hole slash whatever else you want, crazy psycho socionics? How did you get into
Oh, well, that was, I mean, when first looking up, I mean, in my like binge of trying to get information about typology before I was even thinking about a channel, I mean, I ran into it naturally. Um, the, I remember, I think because I was specifically looking up for information about type relations, and I found, I think it's still around, socionics.com.
Yeah, I think so.
That one website where it has like single profiles on the side and like advertisements, and it's like really confusing and kind of sketchy.
Yes.
Um,
I am very familiar with the site.
What's that?
I'm very familiar with the site.
Okay, yes. I've become more familiar, but yeah, so I ran into that. It was always interesting because it took me, I mean, even after I started making videos, I still was like, I it was like it was bad enough trying to piece together all of these different MBTI sites that there were, and then once I learned about the socionics, where it's like it's all being translated from another language, usually Russian, and it's like there's all this info. And sorry, socionics people, but I mean, in my experience, it's so poorly organized. Like from my perspective, like it's so difficult for. I think I don't know how much that reflects on them because my blessing is and curse is that I'm so picky about how I really have to process information before I understand it. I have to like put it through the meat grinder of my head and like have it come out in the proper way the other time. So it takes me a long time to read things sometimes because I just have to like get a pad of paper and write things down so that I feel like I really understand it. But and so then I make videos based off that. But anyway, I mean, I don't know if I've honestly had a hard time. I keep on like doing like scuba dives into socionics because it's like there's so much material there and I've become more and more comfortable with it. But I because I've made a couple of socionics videos and I hope they've um, I know people have pointed out a couple things that I mixed up or got wrong, and I try to always point out where those comments are so that I don't mislead people. But um, I don't know. What did you think about the socionics videos? If
Socionics videos were pretty good.
Okay.
Like the type relations video. I think it's a good video. I mean, I already knew stuff about socionics, but I think it's a good video just for people to get like quick information about socionics.
Yeah.
I think it's just hard for people. So this is a thing that I say on my channel. I'm actually going to start really posting stuff about socionics in the future, but me and my moderator Andrew, we're trying to like come up with a more educational way of and like more organized way of talking about socionics. But I really lost my train of thought.
No, you're good.
Like about, let's see. What was the question? Sorry.
The question you asked me or that I asked you?
You asked me.
I was just curious what you thought of my socionics videos, and you kind of already answered that. So
they're really good. I feel like, and I think that people will benefit. They do benefit from watching those videos. But people get confused with, I think the biggest thing is like the P and the J. So like for introverted types, they have a hard time seeing the fact that in socionics they use the first function, whereas in Myers-Briggs they use the first extrovert function.
yes.
So yeah.
INFJ and MBTI is INFP and socionics, more or less. And yeah, that's thrown me off even these days sometimes, but you know, it's not terrible. But yeah, I've become more, and I keep on mentioning I've been writing my book, but I would like, uh, well, I'm not making any promises. Some ideas from socionics have become more and more, you know, it's interesting how I've like my notions of like the axes categories or temperaments or whatever you want to call them, like the notion of function axes and like those forming like four separate categories that are separate from the Kierkegaard temperaments. And then all of a sudden I look at socionics and I'm like, gosh dang it, they already figured this out. It's like I thought, but I do still claim that I figured them out separately. So it's a Leibniz-Newton situation. But like things like that where I was like, oh, and kind of realized that like it's like I had to figure some of these things out for myself, but then realized that socionics had already figured out some of these logical combinations that, and anyway, there's I have found a lot of insight once I've come to more better understand their eight function system, at least in terms of just how people react to the different functions. And the notion, for instance, of like the vulnerable function, I've found very insightful in understanding different types. And I think I mentioned that in the conflict video, or I'm sure I did. Like the notion that the INTJ has vulnerable FE. So, because I was like, yes, that explains so much because I watched them and it's like they struggle. So it's like that's how I know it's truly an INTJ or an ISTJ is when they struggle so much to like maintain like a pleasant persona like that's natural and stuff, and it's so funny. Or how I like INFJs, the vulnerable function is TE. And every time that I start complaining about the big five or about like empirical science, I'm like, oh, it's my vulnerable TE showing. It's I'm complaining about it because I'm resentful that I just can't do it very well. I just, but I mean, it's also a strength because I do still believe that that's not the sum of all things, TE. But anyway, that was off track somewhere else. But
That's okay. No, I agree with that. My sister is an ISTJ, and I have a good amount of INTJ friends, so I see that quite a bit.
Frankly, it's adorable. I was making a joke. I said, frankly, it's adorable.
It is adorable. It's like a good example, which of course I don't think you've watched this, but I made a vlog actually a couple months ago in July, and I went to Pond City Market, which is in Atlanta. And one of my friends, Danielle, is an INTJ, and she, there's a clip in there where everybody's like hugging each other, and then people are going towards Danielle, and she's just like, get like,
it's so true. It's like, I will not be drawn into this inauthentic show or whatever. Or yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
Or like my sister, that's an ISTJ. Like there's I see it as an iconic picture of her and I, where I'm like hugging her and kissing her on the cheek, and she's just like, like stop.
It's so true.
But so I guess this is just keeping on with all of that. What kind of got you into Enneagram?
Oh, kind of similar. You know, you naturally run across it when you're.
We have an interruption of my dog.
Oh, you have a dog.
Yes, I do have a dog. Henry. Hello.
Hello.
Henry. Say hello. He is a Chihuahua poodle, so a Chihuahua.
Oh.
Yes.
I can tell. I really like dogs. I like cats too. I like animals generally.
We have Henry, and then I have two cats. So
Yay, Henry. Oh, I wish I could snuggle you.
yeah, he's really
He'd probably freak out or something.
no, he would like
Oh,
you.
no, no. He knows. Off he goes.
Yeah, he'll probably stick around. He's probably gonna run around. He just turned 1, and so
Happy first birthday in this beautiful world. Also terrible world, but I emphasize the beautiful because, you know.
there's a theory that Henry's an ESFP. So, and I've also typed my one cat Pumpkin as an ENFJ. I know that's pretty psycho, but
That's great. No, that's fine.
all right. So Enneagram.
Enneagram. Well, you run into it naturally when studying, binging lots of typology and going through like forums and like to try to get information. So I ran into socionics and I ran into Enneagram, and I think I even ran into Big Five a little bit when I was looking through stuff. But Enneagram, I've had a much easier time with than socionics. I think because it has quite a I mean, actually, of all it's the oldest out of all of them. MBTI and Jungian typology was sort of obviously solidified by Jung. Um, Socionics was after Jung, but Enneagram goes back into old Christian traditions, as I understand it, right?
Yeah.
So there's been people around longer to help consolidate the information. Anyway, I really rather like the Enneagram, actually. I've come to, I come to respect systems insofar as I find how well they seem to explain things that I've struggled to get, or not so much explain, but organize information in my life that I have struggled to be able to get a sufficient foothold on before. So it's like, in terms of like dealing with other people. So Enneagram has been able to add another layer onto MBTI I'm most familiar. I'm still kind of in that stage where I'm much more familiar with my descriptions of type 5, which is I very much relate to type 5.
Yeah.
So I understand more about that than some of the others, but I did make the one podcast. So anyway, that's how I got into it, or became more familiar. And I have my new book. So I actually have an Enneagram book now that I'm going to read. But most of it has just come through the internet and stuff.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've watched your Enneagram videos as well, and I think
Oh, you have some Enneagram videos, or?
I've watched them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any Enneagram videos. I'm not completely 100% about what my Enneagram is. I'm pretty sure I'm a type 9, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
So that's kind of one that, yeah. Have you looked into like, um, I think you've mentioned this before, but did you go into like the variants of Enneagram?
A little bit. You're talking about
SX, SO, SP.
yeah. I have a little bit. I don't believe I have never covered it in a video, but I've looked up a bit about it. Though that was a little bit ago, because obviously I focus so much on philosophy and typology strictly, but I know a little bit about it. And I'm trying to remember, I want to say, no, I do remember that if I were to organize myself in terms of the variants, then it would be type 5, self-preservation, and if someone were to ask me for a slice of that, I think it's self-preservation slash, well, there's only two options, social or sexual. remember which one, but I believe self-preservation was like, okay, that fits combined with type 5, and I'm pretty sure it would be type 5 wing 4 if one were to put the wings on there. But so like I said, I'm still kind of in that stage, even after all this time, where I know more about myself and I'm still kind of branching out to getting, and it's always been like that, like, because I'm still trying to learn more and more about NE and how it compares with NI and understand that. Um, but anyway.
Um, that kind of reminds me of like, I know you've interviewed your sister on your channel,
Yes.
ESFJ. Um, how has that kind of helped you, like getting to know or like feeling like you understand people's personality types, or you know what I'm saying? Like kind of,
Yes.
yeah.
It whenever I feel so it's a double-edged sword, I'd say, where for me it I find, see, the way that I try to go about it, I'm always trying to be deferential. I feel like sometimes people are like they want to type other people precisely so that they can, and I might be prejudiced because I feel like my intuition is that it's a more TE kind of thing to do because TE wants to get things done. Um, so they latch onto typology more for the purpose of, or this is how it feels, of trying to say, okay, now I know specifically how I can best interact with other people to optimize my relations with them and optimize my managerial status and rule the world. It's like an exaggeration, but I always try to be deferential because I don't want anybody to feel like I'm in any way condescending, like somehow I now feel like I have some kind of an upper hand over them or anything like that. So as opposed to that, what it has really helped, I think, is in uh, being able to, once I know that, once I feel comfortable that somebody else is another type, and I feel like that helps to explain, it's so helpful when like somebody like really annoys me, or like I feel like somebody is like deeply wrong in ways that are clearly not moral and are just like you know, and it's like and I can like sense, it's like I can sense the resentment boiling in me, like especially when dealing with I've noticed this with people who I think are more ESTJ, where there's certain things that they'll say or how they'll go about things that, as I've looked into myself, I've realized it's not just I'm annoyed, it's that it's like I feel this weird combination of threatened and like kind of resentful because I know they can do things that I struggle to do, but also frustration because they think that what they can do is the end all be all. And so what it helps is to like calm that whole frustration down, because suddenly I feel like I can actually like organize why they're bothering me. And like, so now it's not like this big looming fog that's threatening me. Now it's much more centered on just the person. And suddenly they become much more of a human being to me, because now I'm not, and I guess it's a very perceiving INFJ thing to say, but now I'm not judging them as much. I'm able to just sort of see them, and it, it helps. It actually helps me to not be condescending to them, because now I feel like, okay, now I feel like I have a better grasp on I see why they value certain things and don't seem to value other things that I value. And it's not because they're, I mean, it sounds terrible to say this, but it's not, believe it or not, because they're stupid or inferior. It's because like, it really is because they're different. And I don't feel like, I mean, you can say that people aren't stupid, they're just different. You can say that, but until you really can like see, like apply that and see like how that really is true, in other words, study more about the notion of personalities, then you really don't get it. And so I don't know if that answers your question. It has a lot to do with it. It gives me a lot of empathy, and it makes me more comfortable with and patient with people, and also like with I'm trying to think of maybe an example, like, you know, with my sister, there is the threat of me starting to feel like I now have some kind of a special knowledge that I hold over them, that like I understand them better than they understand themselves, and that's always kind of dangerous. Um, but as long as I don't start becoming, and I feel like anybody studying personality theory passes through a phase where they kind of have to grapple with that possibility of applying it, and come to a point where it's used much more as a way to properly respect other people and understand why they might bother you and stuff. And I don't want to say I'm against people using it in a more, I guess, for lack of better words, a more TE way to, because I know that other, you know, people who are better with TE than I am could probably do it properly, and that's how they work with the world, right? So, and I'm talking a lot, but I mean, I know it's an interview of me, so that makes sense. But um, that's another thing right there, is being able to, for me to be able to say, well, I'm asserting this, like like I feel like, you know, your so and so's TE way of doing things is like, if I didn't have the term TE to like understand it, then it would simply be me like groping in the dark to say, I don't like the way it's like you, it's not that you're TE, it's that you're domineering. And in order for, and ultimately what you end up saying is, in order for you to spiritually develop, you need to become more like me, right? Like that's what you say, even if you don't say it out loud, rather than it being more of, no, actually, you need to develop more in your own way. And once you understand and can describe what TE is, for instance, then you begin to realize, okay, that actually has advantages that I don't necessarily have. And it has disadvantages that I am particularly sensitive to. And, you know, if, you know, I would be the person to call if you needed to point out what those disadvantages were, I'd be more than happy to. But, but it's being able to recognize that and being able to say, okay, well, the advice that I might give may not very well help somebody who thinks more in a TE way. In fact, it might just, because I know that's happened with me a lot in like well, in church, where you have people of different personalities all talking about ethical questions and asserting the same thing but in their different ways, and it colors it. And ESTJs are more common than INFJs, so I feel like there's been a lot of ESTJs who present things in a certain way about spirituality that just does not jive with me. And it's been very helpful to be able to see that, so that it's not me feeling like it's me versus the world. It's now, oh, I really am a different kind of person. And so that's my long answer to that.
Well, I think you did a good job answering that.
Oh, thank you.
Because I definitely have felt the same way. I've had a few, well, at least one boss that I am almost 100% sure was an ESTJ. And she frustrated me to no end. And I know I frustrated her as well. So
Yeah.
I remember like it's like I was always, you know, on time to work, you know, I did everything right, but I think I was too meek for her. She told me I was too engaging with customers. Even though I got everything done, I was too engaging with customers. And
That's fascinating.
she would just like make me clean things like and just like well, she was kind of mean to other people as well, but like, yeah, but yeah, I won't. I feel like it would almost give it away who she is because I don't know if anybody. Because I'm friends with her on Facebook. So she doesn't ever see this, but whatever. It don't work for
Oh,
you.
well, it's out now. No, you know, she probably has things to say about you. No, I just, no, I just thought of it. I had that whole like she thinks you're too meek thing. I'm like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about because I had, and I think I've talked about this before in one of my videos, but I had an ENTJ, or I'm pretty sure ENTJ philosophy professor. So let me set this up because I'm always happy to explain this because it's really fun to me. So I had three main philosophy professors. And the first one I met was, I'm pretty sure, an ENTP, maybe an INTP, but I like to think an ENTP because in my mind, he's like Socrates because he's like short and he had like a big nose and was like fascinating face, which he probably wouldn't take as a compliment, but whatever. He was old and balding and like sort of quirky. And he was the guy who introduced me to philosophy. And he was very engaging and would get in trouble sometimes with the administration because he would ask questions that no one else was willing to ask. And so it's like, okay, so he's Socrates. Then we had like I'm pretty sure he was either INTJ or a unusually I shouldn't say unusually, but a non-stereotypical ISFP, one of those two, probably INTJ, who's just very in touch with, but he was very quiet and he was like super tall and kind of broad-shouldered and like all the ladies like thought he was super handsome and he was so smart. And he was like Plato because he was like this dominant NI and I had him most of the time. And then you had Aristotle, who was the ENTJ, who was the he was so great. He was this short, like, fellow. Uh, very, like, just very ENTJ, very assertive, and very. He loved whenever somebody was able to like encapsulate an idea in just like a single sentence and just be like, bam, and he's like, yes. So we'd all sit around like in a circle, and we'd just like he'd toss out an idea and expect us to just like talk about it. But whenever I would talk about an idea, like whenever I would grab an idea, like I would do what I know what I often do, where I was nervous about asserting anything that like somebody else might call me out on because I just don't like the notion of doing that. I don't want to just be headstrong and leap out there and just blab my mouth and then realize I looked like an idiot. So he called it hedging. Like he started calling me out for it, and it really bothered me because I would like spend the first like minute of my attempt to say anything by basically explaining, so I might not be right about this, or this might not really be like, I'm not so sure, and some people may not agree, but I think this crazy thing. And it was like, you're not allowed to hedge anymore. Like, you just need to assert things. And I'm like, no, I'm not, because then I would be like you and I would say things that are not true. But I didn't say that to him. But he had gotten some things historically wrong about Nietzsche, very historically wrong, and I was displeased. And I called him out for it in class.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, so he liked me, I think. I hope he did. But anyway, so that was my very long I understand that sense of meekness with the TE meeting the INFJ or whatever. But
Well, also, I'm sorry I sneezed. I am.
oh, I didn't even notice.
Oh well, good. I don't know if anybody else knows. I am highly allergic to cats, so and
Oh.
allergic to dogs. Like I have. I don't know if you guys can see, but I have hives.
Oh.
Hives right there. But
So
it's okay.
you've sacrificed for the sake of having them.
Yes.
Oh my. Because I know my dad is, well, he has a much stronger reaction. My father is allergic to pretty sure it's just generally animal dandruff.
I have a. I mean, this is like my mild reaction.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I have a worse reaction than this, but this is
Oh
like
dear.
Yeah, you can build up your immunity towards animals if you're around them for a extended period of time. Like if I'm ever away from them, it's like extreme.
Oh,
I have
okay.
videos on my channel where I was sick for like not sick, but I had like really horrible allergies for like a week, and my voice sounded weird and stuff, and I'll stay up all night. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's worth it. So,
Okay. I understand though, because I feel like it is worth it to have those beautiful balls of fur. But anyway,
have you actually gone onto the chat? Have you gone onto YouTube yet? See what the chat is
um,
saying?
oh, right, because this is live. I have not looked at the chat. Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know if
Let me-
you're, I'm looking at it right now. I don't know if there's any questions. But I thought
Oh,
that,
wow. People, for just a second. Pucokie. Here we go. Ah, there we are. Oh my goodness, there's 16 people watching.
I know, a whole 16.
Oh, that's so weird. I'm hearing myself.
Oh yeah, just mute the volume.
Okay, yeah, I turned down the volume there.
Yeah, I just mute it on my end.
Hi, everybody. I had no idea you were all there.
Yeah.
Oh, Joda JK. Joda JK, you should be ashamed. How dare you?
How did I not see that? How did I not see that?
Uh,
That was,
uh,
yeah, that was very naughty of him to say that.
oh, this is so strange because it's like I'm watching myself, but it's like a minute, like not a minute, but a little bit behind. Oh, that's so weird and meta.
Hey, do you guys have any questions for Michael? I don't know if, I guess they'll see it once it
They'll
catches up.
Oh, I see. I saw you just said it. Okay. So, oh, here's one. What do you think of C.S. Joseph? Um,
Have you watched any of his
I
videos?
have. I know who you're talking about. I've watched a little bit. In fact, he, I'm not sure if he has mentioned me in his videos or not because I occasionally, well, maybe more often than I'd like to admit, I will Google myself because I want to know what other people have said. And he was like his channel and all of his videos like kept on coming up for like 2 weeks. And that's how I found out about him. And I went looking at them and I didn't see like mention of me or anything in them, so I wasn't sure why they were coming up. But I've watched a few of them. Let me actually just want to make obviously. Oh yes, yes. I was. I have watched. I have watched a little bit. He is. I want to watch. I want to watch more because he's also made some videos that are much more philosophical in nature, and that's very intriguing to me. But I am no expert or anything. But I am. Thank you for reminding me. I'm curious to watch more now that you say that. Um, I guess I'll answer the next question. I hope you don't feel too left out of this, as I. Uh, but Michael, do you think you could type collective consciousness of groups such as teams, tribes, nations, species, etc.? Oh, that's interesting. I mean, sure, right? Because the notion is that so long as you treat uh, if you're treating typology as just a like an organizational grid, and you're leaving off it having anything more, if it's just like a series of definitions and things, then that describe things in the world, then theoretically, I mean, you could take it and mold it around and make it so that you could apply it to anything. I mean, that probably sounds weird. I don't know if that makes sense, but like you could. It really just depends on what criteria you are looking for and how it matches up with the criteria of typology. So if you took like a country named, like if you took Spain, obviously like you would have to isolate the particular, I mean, there's no other way to say it. You'd have to isolate a stereotype of Spain, one of several possible ones that you could come at. And you'd need to isolate that and make it specific enough that you could actually type it. Or you could just go pure intuition mode and say, Spain is very this type. And, more or less people will know what you're saying. And, that can be interesting, but obviously it's highly limited. So I don't know if that answers or not. Consciousness is similar to INTJ, shamanic, futuristic, predicting through patterns. Sure. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to sound condescending. Well, it's interesting you mentioned shamanic because that is, I think, of more. It's weird because actually in my book, well, Jung himself, I got it from Jung. He talks about NI having to do with, or suggesting that NI has to do with ancient shamans or even Israeli prophets and things because of the notion that it proclaims what is in the future, or in the case of the shaman, interprets, serves as this interpreter or diagnostician of like this spiritual realm that underlies normal reality. So, and Joda JK, Michael, if each type had their own had their own nation, which would function best? If each type had their own nation. So like I'm going to assume that you're asking in terms of if like you took a person who like was the perfect representation of a type and they were ruling the nation, or if it was, or if you're asking if it was just lost my train of thought. If it was like the country's population was just this type, or if it was you're trying to say something more along the lines of if regardless of the population, if something about the way that the country itself was structured, if that was represented the type, like that the society of, say, the INTJ's country was one that was like super into moving forward into the future, to put it very simplistically. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go that you're probably thinking in terms of like that combined with the notion that everybody in the population is a type. To be perfectly honest, I really don't know, actually, because I'm inclined to say that if you get like nothing but INFJs in a room, or even nothing but ESTJs in a room, I mean, I think in terms of like running external things, if you had nothing but TE types, sure, they would be able to hold up the infrastructure and everything. But I feel like you'd start running into problems. Well, probably run into a lot of problems because whenever you have a bunch of dominant TE people, you have a bunch of repressed FI people and who have trouble recognizing their internal emotions, in the same way that if you got a bunch of dominant NI people together, then they all repress SE, right? So they would all like, I don't know, they'd be like bumping into each other because they'd be so lost in thought, and then they'd all die from falling down the stairs. I don't know. That's silly of me, but let me see. I think you might have. Okay, yeah. So you said either really. So, I mean, I guess I'm saying that types do have to have a certain amount of dependence on each other. But I mean, honestly, in terms of just like running the infrastructure of a country, probably the STJs and NTJs would probably do the best because those are the ones that have TE higher. And just that's sort of something that TE is very good at, is dealing with those structural aspects of things. But I feel like problems might arise in terms of just the quality of life of people necessarily in the state, or like the arts and things, but also like you at least need some people who are more in touch with their FI, so that these countries know where they're building to a little bit better and don't like just go off the rails. Um, I'm spinning this off the top of my head, so I don't know if that really helps that much. But I don't know if I'm willing to say that any particular type would necessarily do any better. But in terms of running a country, probably the ESTJs or something. So yeah, um, should I take another question, or I didn't know if you had any more questions. I didn't want to.
Well, I actually have a kind of maybe not similar question, but kind of along the lines of types. What would you, if you were just to like not even really think about it, um, what would you say um, would be like a good and bad quality of each type?
Without really thinking about it, you
Yes.
said. Okay. Well, let me bam, 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 bam. And I'm going to try to do it stream of consciousness. INFJ, good quality would be very good at making other people feel comfortable in situations, and being able to kind of play therapist. But bad quality, that they often don't, they can be too secretive, or not, feel like they have secret feel like they have secret knowledge that other people wouldn't understand, and that can make them isolated. This is really hard for me, actually, because I'm like totally like spitballing here. Oh,
Oh,
I'm gonna do it anyway because it's interesting. So I really am just going straight off of intuition. Uh, so INFP, I'd say a good quality is kind of similar to the INFJ, actually, in that it's like a therapist thing too, but as opposed to it being like focused on creating a very comfortable situation, the INFP is very good at like listening and accepting people generally. Like I've noticed that they are very, when it comes to the individual, they're very, they're just so chill. And so, in like, it's like this reverse thing where you can become comfortable once you realize that they just will jam with like whoever you are. But a bad quality is that, in a weird way, at the same time, the INFP, it's odd because it's like they're super accepting, but then at the same time, like they, without realizing it, it's almost like they'll have like SI traditions and things that I might be just spitballing too much from just a couple of particular instances. So, but I feel like I've noticed, from at least an INFJ point of view, it's almost like if you mess with the SI traditions, then it's like the they have a hard time with that. I don't know if that makes sense.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know if other people do, but I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
That
So
it makes you feel better.
yeah. So um, I'm getting much more specific than I intended, but let me recap. INFJ, great at making people comfortable, but they can be too secretive. INFP, great at being accepting of people, but then it's except when they're not, I guess. ESTJ, like built. I know this is very cliche and almost condescending at this point, but it's like the world would fall apart if we didn't have them because like they are the ones who actually like, while I'm off doing philosophy, like I get my food because the ESTJ actually like can run a business so that I can actually like go to a restaurant and have someone managing it. That sounded really condescending. I'm not saying that's all you do. I should say like CEOs and things, and not just that, because there are ESTJ philosophers, but and there's people who are just so sharp and they're still ESTJs. So it like breaks that stereotype in a wonderful way. But like they got their stuff together, generally speaking. So that's it in my experience. But bad quality is they can be too self-assured in the fact that they have their stuff together and feel like they therefore like they know everything, even though they don't. Well, even though they don't, I feel like they can get a little too calcified in their in the fact that they have their stuff together and they've got everything controlled, and then um, they can get blindsided by an idea and they don't know how to deal with it, so they just label it as evil, kind of like that. ISTJ, they see right through BS. In my experience, they, in sort of a similar way to the ESTJ, they just have a real sense. It's almost like they're like this pillar and they're like everything's just like this sandstorm blowing past them. So like if you want to know where the other pillars are, like that are going to last for 1,000 years, generally speaking, an ISTJ is a good person to talk to. Um, but the problem is it's actually, I think, and I'm just going off the top of my head, they struggle with other people, and they struggle to interact in a more comfortable, natural way with other people, and they might, like, I'm of the opinion Sigmund Freud was an ISTJ, and I think that, you know, the way that he expressed his theories, he did not have not offending people in mind. So um, there's something about how he said things. So ENTJs, like they're just like Napoleon reincarnated. So they'll, you know, they could take over the world or get really close to it if they wanted to. And you need people like that to be able to really burst their way through things. They're just so energetic sometimes. But the bad thing is that they can steam plow over people, and most notably steam plow over themselves. Like I've seen that again, where they just like they can't. Their vulnerable function is SI according to socionics, and I think that actually means, in some sense, that they do not like to have to pay attention to their own personal like grip on reality, and they're like want to get lost completely in like external presence, and they don't regard their own internal presence or the internal presence of other people. So it kind of, they can bulldoze. I'm trying to run through these. ENFP, ENFPs are fantastic. I mean, all the types are fantastic. ENFPs are, if we didn't have them, then probably like ENFP, it's like I keep meeting ENFPs and it's like they champion the minorities like all the time. Like whenever there's a group who's been forgotten, like the ENFP will just like sniff them out and like find them and make everybody like love them, like, or else. And that can be sometimes the opposite problem, is that they can champion the minorities that they find at the expense of everybody else. And I swear I'm not saying this in a political sense. I'm thinking more in terms of like experiences in school and stuff, or they can find one person and they can decide that it's everybody else's fault, and then bring things down on them for the sake of this one lost puppy. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I already did INFPs. ENFJs are like, I mean, you could, if you can, once they can teach themselves enough good, you know, really work on their public speaking skills and stuff, you know, you can get them up there and it's like, you know, they'll build statues to ENFJs in the future if they get it going right. Like people will just like Martin Luther King Jr. It's like you're a saint now. And the problem is that, like, because they're really good at unifying people and being able to say things in a way that can touch like everybody in a way. But the problem is that I've noticed they can, they can forget in a similar way to the ENTJ in a weird way. They cannot pay enough attention to their own internal presence or the internal presence of others and kind of actually seek too much to unify everybody together so that everybody becomes like this one mass. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But there's almost like that bulldozing mentality thing, but it's like more subtle because we don't think of it in terms of that FE. I hope no one's bored right now. ISFJs they know more about what you need than you ever will know. Like, because they just pay attention.
That's my mom.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, and of course, once again, I'm speaking in terms of like the ideal type, and everybody sort of, you know, these are like almost platonic forms that I'm playing with. But they like so aware of what other people need, and you know, just like these little things that you don't notice, but then you realize are like essential in this really weird, interesting way. Especially speaking as an NI type. But as you asked for a bad thing, I mean, it would be. So I'm actually going off of something that an ISFJ has told me that they had noticed in themselves that they were working on is, and I actually think is an SI thing that is not normally talked about, and that I've tried to understand is this. So it kind of applies to ISTJs too, is this notion of becoming too focused on one's internal realm or like internal lens for reality. And so, I mean, the only way I can describe it is almost like becoming too focused in on one's own body and the sensations one is having. And this can, you know, it can make one very irritable or sensitive to stimuli that one doesn't like. And, you know, you can become too sort of focused in because it's like, that's the price that you pay in order to be so sensitive to what these like minute things that other people need and like noticing them. ESFJ will they are the mother hen that will brood over the egg of your soul and you will hatch. That's my poetry for you. I'll put it into a haiku. But it does feel like that because they're so warm and loving and they'll just like, you know, unless you're an INTJ and then that's like the worst thing that could ever happen to you. It's like a horror film where you're getting devoured by feathers. But for everybody else, it's pretty nice.
Like the extroverted feeling
yes.
little video that you made. I love that.
Oh, that was my attempt at absurdist comedy. I felt really embarrassed afterwards because I felt like
it is so good. If you guys haven't seen that video, what's the video called again? I know it's like
I think it's cinematic FE, or it's got cinematic in the title or something. So.
Well, I like all of those videos, but yeah,
oh, thanks.
in particular is my favorite. I love that one
because it's like that.
It is. It is.
I will give you both my brain, and thereby it will be useless to you. And of course, the film is made by an FI type was the joke. But anyway, but yeah, so that's So one of the problems the ESFJ can have is they can get too swept up in like what is it's almost like it's similar to what the ISFJ has, but like reversed, where they'll become too sensitive to what they think other people are thinking of them all the time and like get way too like in the nitty gritty of, oh, he made this little glance. What does that mean? Like, it's especially bad when like an ESFJ has a crush on someone and then it's like everything like becomes imbued with significance and they know it's dumb, but they can't help themselves. And it's like, and it can be a real struggle because they kind of try to work this out. I don't know if that makes sense, but like this, and it's that way with everybody. Like they can become a little too focused in on what other people are thinking and feeling of them. Let me see. ISFP. If we didn't have the ISFP, then no one would dream ever. That's a silly way to put it. Obviously, we would dream, but I had one friend who was an ISFP, and I remember like we were out in the ocean one time. It's a long story why. And they just looked out, they were like looking out into the sunset, like it was sunset and like it was on the waters and everything. And he was just like looking out and like his hair was kind of long, so it was like in the breeze. And he looked and he looked out and he's like, I'm gonna learn how to surf. And I was like, you go learn how to surf, man, and you just go ride into the sunset. Like there was something about it that was just very ISFP-ish because it was like one statement and it was so like kind of NIFI at the same time. And so it's like there's something like in the ISFP that like touches the mystical sometimes. I mean, that's pretty that's my high praise. The problem is that uh, the mystical is not down here, and so and it's weird because it's not that they're not grounded in reality, but as far as like other people can go, it's a similar problem that the INFP can have from the INFJ's perspective is um, struggling to struggling to keep in mind or from the FE perspective, care sufficiently for the sort of FE values or needs of other people. And so they can sometimes seem neglectful or too um, they'll seem self-absorbed and too often their own world from the FE perspective. And it's a matter of trying to balance that. ESFP, ESFPs are the happy ones. I love ESFPs. I get along with them well, generally speaking. They bring joy into the world, but the problem is that they can be irresponsible. I mean, it's everybody kind of knows that. That one's pretty easy to get at, but they can get irresponsible and run themselves into serious problems. But they are like the heart and soul of the earth. ENTP, ENTPs are so shrewd sometimes, and they have an ability to point out things that nobody really wants to point out. And they'll not only point it out, but they'll point it out while kind of laughing, like not maybe externally, but like in such a way that no one's able to ignore it now. And people can hate them for that, but it's so important. But the problem is that they can, um, they their vulnerable function in terms of socionics is FI. And I think that's really important to note because I do think that ENTPs really struggle to recognize their own and also others like personal values. Like they certainly can be very out of touch with like they don't it's almost like they lack in or feel like they lack an internal compass. Even though they really do have one, it's like they're not in touch with it. And so there can almost be sometimes an antisocial side to them that can be rather unhealthy. Similar-ish thing goes with the ESTP, who it's like the ESTP. They're so interesting. One of the great things about the ESTP is that they are like not afraid of anything except when they are, but like from everybody else's perspective, they're like not afraid of anything. And they similar thing for ISTPs, but ESTPs, trying to think of something good here. I mean, just in my experience, I mean, they're just so forthright, but once again, they're forthright and they conquer stuff. But the problem is that they also kind of can even more so have kind of that antisocial element to them because of the vulnerable FI. The ISTP they can be so perceptive in breaking down things into a very logical, insightful format. But the problem is that they can also be like the ISTPs who I've known, a lot of them have often had like just a really dark sense of humor. And it's like they almost glory in making people uncomfortable sometimes. And I don't think that's a good thing. So that would be the thing for them. INTP, if anybody is going to figure out, if anybody's going to create a unified theory of the universe, it'll be the INTP. They are like practically the archetypal sort of philosopher. But the problem is that I've often found that they can sometimes, from my perspective, feel like they are not fully aware of how subjective they can be sometimes. And it's like they are and they aren't. Maybe it's just my perspective, but it's like sometimes they're not aware of how biased they are in certain things. Yeah, have I left anybody out?
INTJ.
Thank you. INTJ, good thing is that, okay, like, so seriously, you have like Nikola Tesla, who like sets off electrical charges that make all the butterflies in the entire area glow blue, and no one knows how he did it, and neither does he. So INTJs will either destroy the world or save it, or both. Just kidding. They have an ability to not just dream things up, but bring them into reality. The trouble is that sometimes what they can bring into reality may not turn out to actually be a good thing, even if it works really well. So sometimes they can get too caught up in bringing things in, but it turns out not to be good. Whew. You were like staring at me with like this blank stare, and I was like, oh dear, I need to try to speed this up.
No, it's okay. I just was listening.
Yeah, that's like super fast. I don't think I've left anybody out, have I?
I don't think so either. I
Let
was
me.
like I was thinking about them in terms of quadras, and I was kind of like marking off the quadras. So you did the whole alpha quadra, you did the whole beta quadra, gamma. You did the whole gamma quadra.
Yeah,
So
I did.
delta, you did ESTJ, ISTJ, ENFP, INFP. Yeah, so you did everything.
Yeah, sweet. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's Michael Pierce's haiku thing for all of the types. Um, so there you go. I hope that was insightful as always, at least from what people tell me.
Would I know that this is kind of hard, and I don't know if you would want to answer this, but do you have a favorite type?
Well, okay, we need to define favorite. Uh, like obviously in terms of I know there are, so I'll put it this way, there are types that I have had better that and it goes for every type or every person, how they have had better experiences with or just seem to latch on better with certain types. So by my saying favorites, it's not me obviously saying that those types are better. It's just the ones that I've noticed that, and there's several. It's like all of them I could pick something out for, but I keep like if I were to pick, I don't know. What keeps coming to mind is I find, well, they're all fascinating. I'm hedging. Well, probably what I would say is ENFP and INFP. I'm thinking particularly of ENFP. I've actually had a number of good and then also bad relationships there. It's been very interesting, but always like, I really do think that there's something to the notion that the INFJ and the ENFP, because they have like, it's like they're like opposites, but opposites attract. So dominant NI versus dominant NE, or auxiliary FE versus auxiliary FI, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I've really noticed like there's this weird mirror thing that can crop up, that it's like we think so differently, but then at the same time, it's like there's all these weird parallels. And so that's probably what I would say as far as the reasoning and everything. But like, obviously, I have friends from all the types and have a great time, and they balance me out in important ways, and so that sort of thing. But I think that is my answer for you. Probably be ENFP, but
That's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, I have a lot of ENFP friends as well. I don't really have too many negative experiences with ENFPs.
yeah.
One of my favorite, so I would say my favorite is ENFJ.
Yes.
But I also really like INTJs. INTJ
Yes.
is pretty close to ENTJ. But I have had actually with ENFJ, I have had some bad experiences as well. It's been kind of the thing of the very negative. So like most of the ENFJs I know or like that I admire are good. But I have, like, for example, I had a restraining order against an ENFJ.
Oh, I'm
I've never said
sorry.
it on my channel, but yeah, I had a restraining order for one of them. And then for INTJs, I have a lot of a lot in a sense. I have a good amount of INTJ friends, but I also have INTJs that I either was close to at a point, um, and it's just like basically with INTJs, they're either my best friend or my worst enemy. So,
Oh, so true.
so, so I really, yeah, but yeah, if I didn't have that one bad experience with that one ENFJ guy,
Yeah.
I would say ENFJs have been pretty solid. So, but yeah. Um, so kind of want to wrap it up shortly because I do need to call someone later. But do you have anything that you would like to end on, like some remarks?
Oh, I can actually hear my voice feedback. I don't know if that's is it still doing? Okay, cool. It's not there. Okay, cool. We're good.
It was on your side.
Oh, it was on my side?
Yeah, I don't think it was on my side.
That was weird. Yeah, just it's thank you so much for having me. Thank you everybody in the the chat over there. Sorry if I sorry if I didn't see everybody over there, but I'll be looking through the chat somewhat compulsively later. I would just say thanks so much for the support, and as always, just I really appreciate the feedback, and I always hope that the content I produce will always be something that is helpful and that uh, well is accurate, obviously. And I'm now going to just watch through like all of your videos now.
Oh
I'm
no.
like, where did she talk about me? But also because I think it's interesting. Um, you have a very nice presentation, so that's my compliment to you. Um, but was there anything that you wanted to ask or anything, or for my closing remarks? That was my stumbling
Let's,
attempt at them.
there's so many things. Okay, we'll end on this.
Okay.
Explain your inspiration for uh, Yoda being an ISTP.
So wait, do you mean in terms of like why did I make that video or
That
why?
video was awesome. I love that.
Oh, you liked that video? So like why did I make that video or where did
Like whatever you want to say.
it I didn't know you liked that video so much. That's the only video where I've actually used clips from other videos in it. It was interesting. But why was I doing well, to be honest, I was having a lot of trouble like coming up with what I wanted to make a video about because I had all these philosophy video ideas, but I'm like, I really need I really ought to do something about typology, right? Because I mean that's like what I do. And I was listening, what was I doing? I was I can't remember why. I think I had recently watched Star Wars the night before, and it was almost like thoughts that you have in the shower when you're not really thinking, and it's just like chugging around. And I was like, Yoda's whole philosophy is like very TI. I think it was because I was because I had it in the video, the Mr. Plinkett reviews, and where he's talking about TI. And I've always found those fascinating. And all of a sudden I was like, that's a very TI philosophy. What if I were to like, Yoda seems to be like a TI type. Is he an INTP or an ISTP? And I just started thinking this out and I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a video about how because I just felt this burst of inspiration. And I think I was actually making like some other more general type video like that day. But then like I just had this inspiration. I was like, haha, I'll just start typing this out. And then I just like wrote the whole script in a day instead of doing what I was originally doing. And I was like, so then I just worked from that and shored it up and everything. But so that's kind of where that came from. It just sort of came out of the blue. I'm glad you liked it.
I think I commented on it.
Oh, I think you did. I'm only thinking that because I thought that your icon was slightly familiar with you holding the pumpkin or whatever. But anyway.
Maybe. I don't know. I I can be pretty much a ghost watcher for a lot of people's channels. So
Mhm.
people don't even know when I'm watching their videos, but some people I will comment a little bit more. But yeah, I'll try to comment more on your
You
videos.
froze up for a minute.
Oh, well, I don't know if it froze on their side, but I was saying I can be kind of a ghost watcher on people's videos. And are you there? Hello? All right. Well, I don't know. Is it Michael? Well, At this point, I think that it's frozen, so I don't know if Michael's still here, but I hope you guys have a good night, and I will see you guys later. Bye.